Says you just went live.
Good evening, boys and girls. We are, I believe, live. We're doing it live in a very real sense here. Boat is not with us today, and so Asher and I are cobbling together a show. Asher is not responsible for any of the hilarious idiocy that's going to take place today. It is all my fault, and that is something that I am pleased. LifeShifter and Asher have been helping me get the new overlay with the all these stream elements up and running. So that's pretty cool. We've got a red shirt today, which is good. We didn't have that. We can see new subscriber animations are working and are popping up on the. So this is like our new stream alerts thing. I don't really know how to describe it. Asher, why don't you say hello? Because it's going to be you and me and lots of questions today, I think.
Well, I gotta say the background looks good. And before we get into the meat of the meta, I just want to say this is just a warning to everyone. I just got in from mowing my lawn. I bought a push mower, like the old kind that has no motor, because I thought it would be like environmentally conscious and
Those things are
a good
awful.
exercise.
Like that they
It
they
is the
really they
worst.
I actually I used to have a push mower myself, like when I first got a house in Madison, and then I ended up getting an actual like an electric mower, which also didn't really work very well either. Like you really just need the internal combustion, go fuck yourself thing. And then
Yeah.
I ended up just hiring a fucking lawn service because Jesus Christ, what is my shirt size? This is I think it's a size large. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. So I need to work out. I'm gonna actually have to try to make up for the enthusiasm gap here. Normally speaking, Boat is so manic when he gets on the show, and
Right.
we've had a pretty chill day today in space. I know that you've got the Alliance tournament practice that has been pushed back because you've chosen to be a guest on the Meta Show. Where by chosen I mean I begged you to deign to grace us with your presence. And then the fireside things are really chill in the Imperium. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to ask you a little bit about your Alliance tournament experience, what it's like actually practicing and prepping. CCB has changed the rules this year to make people actually, basically compete to get into the tournament, as opposed to a really sort of shitty thing that they were doing before, where you had to just roll the dice to get in. Before we get into that, I'm going to get some shout outs to people here because we've gotten some subscriptions and things like that. So RDevs for
This is
9 months.
some of the money I saved for
Oh
unsubbing
wow.
some accounts.
I actually getting to hear like text to speech going off for the donations. Wow, that's a $50 donation. What the hell, dude? Uh,
Nice.
that's really cool. Nanak Helsinki.
Can I get
That's
some of that for my
yeah.
non-electric lawnmower fund?
Throwing money at things. Yeah. Somebody's saying reposition the camera. Yeah. So things are definitely a bit of a mess today as we're trying out the new things. Throw some Black Eagles in chat. So I was going to give other shout outs. Ardez, we had Atarwe with Metashow Best Show, Twitch Prime, 4 months. Thanks you for the Bezos Bucks. Terror Bin as well. And I might have lost a couple guys in scrollback, but I appreciate that. So if I can, you want me to reposition the microphone or the camera? Uh,
Yeah, I think if you move to your left, you'll be more in the center frame, is what people
so
are
I'm like
saying.
leaning
And
in over here. Like basically I should be more like this. Yes, I think that's the television appropriate way of doing things. Um, no awesome meta show intro. That is correct because I don't have the meta show intro. Normally it is Boat who is doing that. Reset for 3 months. Zemok, thank you, dude. And so we just sort of went straight into it. We went live to it, and we don't have an Eve background. We just have this nifty meta show background that the creative department made for us. So Asher, why don't we get things started? I want to hear. Why don't you tell us what has changed with the Alliance tournament that makes it different from last year, and tell us a little bit about your experiences trying to get
sure.
Goonswarm into the Alliance tournament in the past.
Right, right. What a world to have like Goonswarm talking about the Alliance tournament. Like it's weird. Uh, Also, a couple people have said you're quiet, so maybe while I ramble, you can get your mic
I
level
can
up or something.
diddle with the microphone a bit. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the last has it been the last 3 years? I think it's been the last 3 years. I've been the purported captain for the team, and we tried to enter, but they have a random draw, and we randomly did not get drawn 3 years in a row, which I always thought was kind of unfortunate because obviously Goonswarm usually the largest alliance in the game, and so you had the largest alliance in the game unrepresented, while some group of like 10 alts got picked.
Well,
Was,
they had like a buy-in system, right? Like there was a thing where there's like
there were
a random
yeah.
draw that we never got in, which may or may not be a conspiracy theory, but people could like buy their way in. So like how did that work?
There's two things. So you could enter the lottery, right? And that was just like you entered a base fee, and if you didn't get drawn, you got the fee back. It was like 5 plex. And so that's what we did every year. Now you could pay like an auction type system, a blind auction, and it would that was only like for 5 or 6 teams, and the amounts that got paid. I think the lowest entry last year was I think 70 plex or something similar to that. So for a first time team, or more or less a first time team, it wouldn't have made any sense to do that. You're never going to see anywhere near that value back. So this year they had a play-in, which 58 teams competed for 20 or 32 spots, and which is I think a much better system because it gives everyone a shot. And the play-ins were really interesting format. So you played 28 teams played each other, so it was like 28 versus 28. And of those 28, all the winners of that one game went into the Alliance tournament guaranteed. And then there were 28 losers, and those 28 teams played for the final 4 spots.
So 28 losers fighting for 4 golden tickets, and you ended up in the losers
Yeah.
bracket, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We lost our first match. It was really close. It was one of those ones that was, it could have turned on like one or two things, looking back. You lose these, you look back, you say, oh, we could have done this, we could have done this, but
Right.
they could have done those things too. So
The spirit
but,
of the stairs, right? Yeah. I should have said
so
this.
they
I should
won.
have done that.
Right. So then we had to run the gauntlet the next day. and so we won our first match pretty easily. And then we were going to play the winner of the next match, and neither of them showed up. So we got a second round bye, which is
They
obviously
didn't even bother. Wow, interesting.
Neither team did. Yeah, if either team had just arrived, they would have got into the second round and played us. And then so we got into the final round, and then we played like a drone mirror matchup, and we won that one pretty well, pretty handily, and we advanced. So we played 3 matches. We showed 3 different comps, and looking back, it was actually way better for us to lose the first one because it gave us a lot more,
experience, basically.
Yeah, and you can't replicate that. In practice, you don't get the nerves, you don't get like the just everything, like the nervousness.
The adrenaline rush isn't there, right?
Exactly. So it was great for our guys to do it, and for me to do it that way. So looking in retrospect, it was great, but
at the time it was quite stressful. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because like it's the first time that actually having a playoff for the tournament. One of the things that was mentioned to me, I'm not sure whether it was me talking to Nimbler about this because he's in town, or something that somebody mentioned at the Madison Monthly Eve Meet, which was on Thursday, and we had a ton of people. Was basically, why do we even call it the Alliance Tournament anymore? Right? Like, it doesn't really have anything to do with alliances because there's these weird like alt teams of like random PLR alts, or just essentially, why, maybe we should call it like the Grand Tournament, or the Big Eve Tournament. That's a really good creative name that I just came up with. The really big Eve Tournament.
Branding, like
yeah, I'm on fire today. I clearly the messaging.
One thing I've actually. So on my podcast, I've talked about this a few times. I think the Alliance Tournament is pretty good advertising for Eve. It gets a lot of viewers. It gets some reporting. But it is inscrutable if you don't know the Eve meta at all.
And it's not even the Eve meta. Like, it has a very specific, like, in the rest of Eve, like one of the reasons I never really given a shit about the Alliance Tournament is it has so little to do with the actual Eve Online outside of the Alliance Tournament. Like, even figuring out what a Tinker setup was, and like, Tinker teams are really big this year. What the fuck is a Tinker team? But everybody who's what is that actually, Asher? What the fuck is a Tinker team?
So it's and I've explained a Tinker many times because it's something that it's the most talked about of the sort of unique Alliance Tournament setups, and it's the thing that the most people don't know. So a Tinker is when you have one ship that's a Logi ship. It's almost always a T3. And you have an extra large ancillary booster. That's like the booster that uses ammo. But when it runs out of ammo, it can still run. It just uses an insane amount of cap.
Right.
So your ship will cap out in like 15 seconds if you keep it running, or even less. But what a Tinker does is all the ships around that ship, which is like a Tengu with the local rep and remote reps, they all feed cap to the Tengu. So the Tengu can run its local rep permanently, or it can run its remote reps permanently because it has infinite energy essentially. And so Tinker means that all the ships around it are feeding it cap, so that it has infinite tank. Because what happens is, like, you shoot a Scimitar or an Oneros in the game, and when it runs out, it usually lives until it runs out of the sort of booster charges,
right?
And then it dies. But if you don't need booster charges, the idea is that you would live forever. And so sometimes Tinker matches are super boring because neither team can break each other. So they haven't really banned it this year, but they don't allow Logi T3s this year. So you have to use like either like a Basilisk, which is not very good, or an Atana, which is an Alliance Tournament ship that not many people have access to.
Yeah,
it has a really unique meta.
How did the name Tinker even come up? Is this like one of those things where sort of like Goku Fleet, like somebody just called it a Tinker and it's been called a Tinker ever since?
Yeah, I think I've heard it before, and if I remember correctly, Tinker is a character from Dota who does something like that. I don't really know the answer beyond that. So whoever said this is like that character.
Yeah, if anybody in chat knows, let us know, because I have no idea.
So what I proposed in my podcast before is that CCP should do a real Alliance tournament. They should keep the current Alliance tournament going, and we'll call it, one of your great names, like the Big Eve,
the Big
Showdown,
Eve
or whatever.
Yeah,
yeah. We'll keep that, like the smaller, tournament. But they should have one that has like 70 people or maybe 80 people on each team, and then what they should do is they should have the fights go on. You could set up a set of rules. I proposed some. The rules don't particularly matter. It could be 70, ships, nothing more than a T3 cruiser, T1 Logi, whatever it is. And then each alliance could come up with a team, and then CCP could this is what I think would make it more interesting, is instead of streaming it live, you would have you'd have the matches. Then CCP would go in after the fight, look at like interesting camera angles, and then have
right. Make it
interview
like
all
a
the
reality
people.
show, basically,
Yeah,
out of it.
interview the FCs, and then have the commentators talk about, oh, this was the strategy, this is what they did, and I think that would draw more people to Eve, because that's the uniqueness of Eve. Having a 10v10 can be done in lots of games, and generally better and more watchable.
Right.
League of Legends is infinitely more watchable than Eve Alliance
Damn
tournament.
straight, right. Also, Noisy Gamer, as usual, helping us out with the facts, is pointing out in chat that apparently a dude named Tinkering, I didn't know there was a guy in PL named Tinkering, but he apparently came up with the name Tinker Setup is named after this dude who was
I thought it was Tinking was his name, but okay. I would not argue.
I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure that Noisy Gamer is probably right. Huh. I mean, I think it's a great idea to have an alliance tournament that is more representative of alliance warfare to show people what people would be getting into, right? So, like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, one of the biggest like media events of the year in terms of CCP promoting and broadcasting is the alliance tournament, but it doesn't really serve to draw in new players in any way because it's highlighting an extremely specialized thing that only a few people in Eve itself understand. They put on a show for Eve players, but if you had a tournament that was explained, like you're suggesting, to everyone and showing, like, just like the This Is Eve video was really good at bringing in new players. If they had a show about a fleet tournament, as it were, I think that would bring a lot more people in. Hey, like I saw this on TV and I could come play this game and it's free and
it's different. Like
that.
no one else has giant fights like that, and they have interesting strategies that they explained.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, but that would require. I think that would be something you would do if you weren't taking your money out of the game to develop other games.
Right. Yeah. If they were not. Well, I mean, that's another thing that we're going to be talking about today. And I know that on Talking in Stations and also on various other shows that we've had for this week, it's just been pretty much nonstop discussion of CCP's latest series of PR blunders. We talked about it last week. We had a huge number of people watching the Meta Show. We also had a huge number of people watching the Fireside Chat before the Meta Show last week. And within the Imperium, at least, everybody's pretty much shrugged and gone back to making tons and tons and tons of ISK with lots of safety. But judging from a quick browse at Reddit, it appears that the natives are still restless. Asher, have you heard what's happened recently? I mean, it seems to be like they backed off this nerf. Resubscribed for 32 months. Wow. Zedia is in fact winning. That is very impressive.
Have you been streaming for 32 months already?
Yeah, I mean, we've been a partner Twitch channel. We didn't really promote like the subscription thing, but we've been a partner Twitch channel since like May of 2013. It was actually pre-acquisition, because we're like the Freemasons in space and we get into all sorts of places that we shouldn't. So that's awesome, Zeddy. Let me throw out some frickin' 2013 Seabass is pointing out. So yeah, I'm gonna throw some Black Eagles here in chat. But essentially, they walked back some of the fighter nerfs on Monday. They kind of like came to and were like, oops, shit, we're sorry. What's been your impression of what they've been doing, and what do you think about the changes?
All right, so this is probably an unpopular opinion with the mob, but I actually thought that they needed to make those changes. I thought the carrier fighters and super fighters or bombers needed to be nerfed. I thought the way they presented it was awful. If they had just come out and said, hey, guys, these things we feel they're a little overpowered in PvP, and we're tuning them around that. And they hadn't mentioned PvE at all, I don't think there would have been nearly as much, of this crazy summer rage-inducing thing going on. People would have been like, some people have been like, I disagree, I don't like it, CCP devs are dumb. But because they came out and said, oh, it's explicitly for PvE, and clearly that did not, we're going to see that that's not going to address the problem, right? And then especially even walking it back some, it's definitely not going to address the problem. So I think that the way they communicated it was really bad. I mean, carriers were going to become the battleship, and I don't think that's a good place for the game to be. I think battleships and subcaps should have a really important place in EVE Online, and you shouldn't have to be this tall to ride.
Yeah.
And so I thought the nerfs were necessary, but the communication was atrocious. And now they've walked some of it back. I know CCP devs used to do that a lot more. Do you remember when they would release, hey, we're going to nerf this ship by 35%, and then they just would anticipate the rage and then come back and say, oh, we're going to do it by 20,
Right.
even though that was like their original
The
goal.
plan to, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I don't think that was the case here, but they had to walk it back. They had to give him something.
I actually agree with you. Like the thing, we talked about this a little bit last week, and one of the things I'm going to link here in chat is sort of related to this. Earlier on the show, it wasn't actually the show, but it was, I think this was on Matterall's show or Dirk's show. Carneros is no longer under NDA from his time at CCB, and I'm going to link this here. There was a clip of him describing the original Summer of Rage and the interactions with Hilmar, the CEO of CCP, and how
Now, that was rage-inducing.
that exactly, and that Summer of Rage was very different. I mean, I ended up in Iceland 5 times that year, a couple times for CSM summits, once for FanFest, and then also the emergency summit that happened due to the Jita riots and all the crazy shit that went down with that. Matterall, while I'm doing shameless plugs for dudes on INN who have done awesome work, Matterall has published one of these amazing articles of his where he goes back and he digs up all the facts of everything. So if you guys aren't familiar with the original 2011 Summer of Rage, between the Carneros chat that I linked earlier and the article about the Summer of Rage, it's very long. It's extremely well researched because it's Matterall and that's how he rolls. But
Matterall really ruins a lot of my hate for NC Dot. Like just by him being a member, it's like.
Yeah,
it's
really tough. Like if Lady Scarlet actually ended up being in charge of NC Dot, I don't know what we do, because now that we've been fraternizing basically with certain elements of NC Dot.
Right.
Vince.
Praise be for Vince though.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Thankfully, Vince is enough of a douchebag that we're all like,
yeah.
We'll screw him or whatever. But like, yeah, Matterall and Lady Scarlet. Like I've now gone drinking with Lady Scarlet a couple of times now, and like. It's kind of alarming how basically if they weren't in NC Dot, they are sort of culturally very similar to Goons, at least that corporation. The rest of NC Dot, not so much. But yeah, Matterall does ruin the hate. Good research looking into all of this. I think
I was during a sort of boring Citadel shot the other day. I went to the Evil Evolution NC Dot member corp.
Mm-hmm.
To their recruitment guides, and I just read it to my fleet.
Oh,
I do this about once a year because it is guaranteed.
Did you do the stuff about do they still have a thing? Does Evolution still have the thing about being a bitch, like having officially?
No, not being a bitch. That would be even slightly more acceptable. It's a biatch. It's written.
Oh, that's right. It's spelled biatch. God.
New members are biatches, and you will be assigned a daddy, and your daddy will help you out.
It's just 15 months. Thank you, Herfley. That is, yeah, no, it is. Evolution is still just garbage, right? Like, when we're talking about like the Lady Scarlet's Corp, I think it's DICE, Destructive Influence, and that really destroyed a lot of the hate and E for me when I'm like, I like hanging out with Lady Scarlet and Matterall, and they're culturally, like, that corporation at least are very they look like they know how to party. Let's put it like that. So when we're at Eve Vegas or something like that, it's they have more in common with us than they do with people in PL who are sitting around and not really talking to each other and being kind of awkward and weird. So
I feel. Speaking of awkward and weird, I feel awkward being the loudest person on the meta show. Usually, Boat is here to just tower over me in decibels.
I know it's really weird. We're gonna have actual conversations and let each other complete sentences. And
but I miss it. I miss it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that was said in chat earlier is, I think that this is key. Boat is coming back. It's not like we've fired Boat or anything like that. He's spending time with his family this week. He thought that I was going to be live streaming this from California. I didn't end up going out to E3 this year, so. Boat will be back next week, and it really is a testament. Somebody pointed out in chat, how good of a job Boat does in terms of producing and managing this shit show, basically. Like making sure that the sound levels. Also, Life Shifter basically managed to teach me how to unfuck this very rapidly. So credit to INN producers and credit to Boat. Like, this shit is actually really hard.
You and I both like being extemporaneously on topics, but we don't necessarily like to be the one who like guides moderates the show.
Exactly.
So we're both willing to go on at great length about whatever you want to talk about, but we don't usually bring up the topic itself.
Yeah. So it is it's weird because it's a calm week. I think like
Yeah.
we're in a situation here where, and I can tell, like I'm looking at this and people are furious. I think that the changes were actually entirely reasonable, and I think that fighters did need to get nerfed. It's just that the messaging from CCP has been such garbage tier stuff. Like, you know, here's another thing. This came up at the Madison Monthly Eve meet on Thursday, where people were talking about like boycotts, right? And how would we more like, should we boycott CCP? Should we get people to mass unsub, things like that? And I said that I didn't think there was a time for that at any level at the moment. But um, you know, people were really mad about the repeated nerfs to roll calls, which is like a Fozzie thing. And then Larrikin, who is normally like super, super chill and like the expert when it comes to capital stuff, Larrikin pops up and people are mad about the fighter nerfs. But we all know Dark Razor. Dark Razor is like a top tier FC who now works at CCB and has done a lot of really, really good work. So Larrikin pops up, and then everybody, like all this pent up anger, I think, that really comes from whenever Fozzie touches anything, it pretty much turns to shit. And that got put on Larrikin, and then Quant turned up, I think, to defend his buddy Larrikin, right?
Yeah, that was we ride together, we die together. But
Exactly, yeah, because like because kind of like a Larrikin, Larrikin's one of the good ones basically, and he's got a good team behind him. And I think Quant, yeah, he turned up to defend his guy, and it was really people pissed off about a bunch of other stuff, and it all just came to a head, and it was stupid.
okay, I've got a lot to unpack here. I can't. I wish I could remember who said this to me so I could credit them. But someone pointed this out to me. I thought it was a great take. Before injectors, if you wanted to be a Rorqual pilot, you had to spend a year or two's worth of your time to get there, and that was per account. So you had to have like a lot of a lot of time and put in ahead of time to become a Rorqual pilot. But once they made it available that you could do it in an hour, it changes the math on this kind of thing. So people are saying, well, I can have 5 Rorquals and they'll pay me back in a month and a half. So not only that, when you encourage people to rush this whenever you put out something that's really good, whereas before people would say, nah, I won't train to it because by the time I'm there, it'll be nerfed, right?
Right.
Not only that, but once they actually spend the money and you nerf it under them, they have a really justifiable sense of anger. Like, hey, you just tricked me into spending either a lot of space money or a lot of plex to buy the injectors. That helps your company, and then you just rip it out from under me, and now I'm really pissed off, and rightfully so, in my opinion. So the injectors open up a new can of worms when it comes to balance.
Yeah, it is one of those things because if people can just inject stuff, and you have some people who have worked to get to a certain place, like you worked for a long time to train into getting a Rorqual, and now you have this mix where some people, they got the Rorquals instantly, that they like made a bunch of money scamming somebody or through some other thing, then they injected and they got it. So some people are like, yeah, well, whatever, it got nerfed, no big deal. Other people are like, mother of God, I've been training into this thing for more than a year. What the fuck, CCB? Grr. It's just, I think that like ultimately, I feel like the reason why we're seeing the focus on nerfs on PvE and production is a symptom of the real disease, which is Fozzie. Like
Hit the nail on the head.
Oh, I mean,
and Citadel's being awful on top of that. It's
yeah,
a little column A, a little column B.
I want to talk about the Citadel thing in a moment because here on the Meta Show we often talk about how Fozzie is literally the cancer killing Eve, and I'm going to just try to spell this out in a non-Summer of Rage style way because hopefully somebody from CCB might be listening. I actually don't know how to check and find that out anymore. That was something that somebody told me last week. So I have no idea whether they'll listen. I have no idea whether they're paying attention. But, I was saying this on the fireside. I don't like peace. None of our guys like peace. I mean, especially for a guy like me, I barely play Eve. I pretty much only do the meta. So for me, Eve Online is a game of war and diplomacy and espionage and outmaneuvering your opponents. So essentially, I pretty much can't play Eve except as a management simulator, which is, I'm okay at it, but it's boring as fuck when we can't go to war. And so, like, I can't do any meta fuckery or anything to, like, get at CO2 because the Fozzie system is making it such that, like, oh, wow, well, the Imperium has its 8th keep star. Herp, derp, derp, derp. Like, in a month, we'll have even more keep stars, keep stars, keep stars, keep stars. Everything in Delve has a beacon in it. Everything in Delve practically has a Fortizar or 2 in each system. But I can't play Eve because we can't actually go to war under the system. And it's just that's why everybody is producing so much. That's why CCP is seeing Delve shoot up in terms of the rankings, because until we can go burn somebody's house down and winter is coming, if we leave momentarily Delve, Fazisov is everything is vulnerable, and even if we blow up a bunch of stuff under Fazisov, 2 or 3 days later it all goes back to whoever is actually living there. So I think that's the real reason why you're seeing so much just PvE focus and rage.
There's a scene from Two for the Money where Al Pacino talks about gambling addiction and how you actually don't love to win, you love to lose. Um, and I always thought it was a really good scene. But one thing that kind of struck true to me was that when we were getting, losing space and losing ships and losing shitty members in Saranin, I was having more fun then than I was now, because it was more fun to be in the game and lose than it was to be on top of the game and win. And I think that's what you're expressing right now, is that you'd rather be mixing it up and doing something than just building your next keep stock.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that throughout Goonstorm's history, we have almost always been at war. War is a force that gives us meaning, and I get fucking itchy after just a month or two of peace. I'm so used to us always having some campaign or something to do or some place to fight, and ever since Fazisov went in, you know, periodically, there's just no challenge, right? Even if the stakes are lower, right? Like you're not risking the entire empire in Saranin or something like that. There is at least a challenge, and now in Fazisov there is no challenge, and so people are pissed off about a whole bunch of different things because people aren't focused. War focuses players on each other, and when there is no war, then the only thing that anybody can focus on is CCP, and it's sort of inevitable that creates this kind of bullshit as a result.
Here's the problem, in my opinion, is that CCP has built an Age of Empires game where building walls and turrets is more powerful than building units and trebuchets.
This is an excellent segue. One of the things, besides talking about how Fazisov is a cancer on Eve, and that's why everybody's producing so much, one of the criticisms that's been leveled recently, including by Gobbins, and this is an extremely rare thing. I want to say that Gobbins actually made a pretty lengthy and good post talking about the challenges of Citadels. Asher, you've been front and center dealing with Citadels, both us defending them and us blowing them up. What do you think is broken about Citadels, if anything? What needs to change?
The problem is, and this is my example, was that you cannot build like an RTS game where the number one strategy is to wall around your base and put up towers, because there's no way to break that, right? And it just encourages people to turtle. You need to build a game where attacking is the right meta, and it is tough. It is really tough to balance EVE Online. Not only that, the developers now have 15 years of development debt that they have to pay for. Like, I think artillery is extremely hard to balance around, right? And they can't just go back and delete artillery ships. That's something they have to just work with.
Right.
So I do recognize that, and I feel like the development staff of EVE, for the size of the game, is extremely understaffed. Saying all of that, Citadels have been awful from a design perspective, because all they do is they encourage you to spam as many as possible and to waste people's time, not to care about them, really. And they don't encourage you to leave your space to do anything else and attack other people's Citadels, because they are so powerful defensively. So not only that, but the way you're tied to your space is, say, and I've tried to pitch you on this before. I say, hey, let's go fight this guy right now, right? You're like, well, yeah, if we go do that. The problem is that, all our iHubs get blown up because we can't come back to defend our space, right?
Yep.
So it's bad for us to leave, because all this investment that we've made will get destroyed.
Yeah,
so you have
it ties
to
us
where
down.
It's better for us to stay at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the fundamental issue, and this is something that in chat I wanted to respond to. Somebody was saying, well, if you're itchy and you want to do war, why don't we go blow up the culture in Fountain? So, one of the things I wanted to talk about today was the sort of war and strategy, and what could we do to make war in EVE great again. And so let's think about it from a autocrat an alliance leader perspective of what happens. Why wouldn't we go to war against the culture, especially after the culture went on Reddit a while back and so desperately tried to bait us into doing exactly that, to cross what we call the KVN gap in Fountain. So if you look at the map, the geography of Fountain, the key thing about Fozisov is you have to live in the space that you take, and not you have to live there and like you can go deploy and then come back and defend and bounce timers. Like in the Dominion system, you could both make war and hold space as long as you're willing to do a little bit of commuting, right, to actually handle timers and deal with the SBU cleanup and all that. So if we went to Fountain, first of all, we would need to be able to hold it forever, right? And there's simply too much space there, and the space is also not that valuable in the area right across the KVN gap. It's up by J5A, which is where the culture really lives, at the very north end of Fountain, bordering into Cloud Ring, is really far afield from our territory in Delve. So sure, we could sort of move into some areas of the shitty parts of Fountain, and then you have to hold it, and then you have to engage in Fozisov gameplay. And it's been so long since people have really done Fozisov, because I think across Eve, the alliance leaders have basically just started acting like Fozisov as a game mechanic doesn't exist. People burn out. I mean, Asher, how long do you think you could handle actually Sovwanding shit before you wanted to literally just
I've done it
stick your
before,
head in
and
a
like a
blender?
month. A month is probably the max. Um, Paradoxically, by making War and Eve easy, they've made it hard. Because it is so easy to assault anyone's space, it is so easy to go back and assault someone's space when they leave their own.
Yeah.
If there were more of a commitment to fighting, and people actually had to spin up a real force instead of like a frigate to go and toast something, you would see people leaving your space. But I guess I'm going to keep on quoting movies.
Go for it.
It's become a thing where the things you own you. And
More money, more problems.
yeah, once you have an iHub that you've invested in, you need to sit there all day and watch it. That's all. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, again, I keep giving him plugs on the Meta Show and in public because it's a great idea. One of our guys, Johnson Stroker, I also just like to say one of our top theorists, Johnson Stroker. Johnson Stroker was like, hey, why don't we make it such that if people want to do offensive in Tosis, they need to declare war first, right? They need to have some skin in the game. Because anybody can attack and only the Holding Alliance can defend, the balance between the attack and the defense is really skewed. It's a paradox because a few minutes ago, Asher, you were talking about how Citadels make it too easy to build turrets and defend with Citadel mechanics, but the actual Sov mechanics themselves are completely skewed in the favor of being way too easy to attack. Without tons of Citadels, you can't really defend your space.
It's weird. We're talking about parallel soft systems here, more or less, both balanced in a sort of weird way.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think it does seem that like the Citadels are, I think that the Citadel mechanics, gameplay wise, they might have some challenges, but in general, I've said good things about Citadels. The amount of time it takes to blow them up can be problematic if they're going to end up being pseudo-sov structures, because I mean it takes like 9 days to whack a Citadel from start to finish, assuming that you're able to hit every single timer. And we haven't seen a full regional sweep because nobody was really wanted to go through the effort of blowing up an entire region's worth of Asterhus. Back in the day, the total time to take out a tower, because the Asterhus is sort of like a large POS, right? It's intended to replace towers. They both cost about the same, between 800 and 1.5 billion ISK. Large fuel tower with lots of guns on it, lots of effort. But you can pop a large tower in 2 days, right?
yeah,
And
if
it's
they
just two
changed it,
timers.
get rid of the iHub, put the upgrades inside of Citadel. So in
Mhm.
an Astra House, Fortizar, or Keepstar, then you would some of the paradoxically easy parts would go away. Just make the Astra House have one timer. So you ref it one day, you kill it the next day. Give the Fortizar two timers. So ref it one day, ref it the second day, kill it the third day, and keep the Keepstar as is.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's a really good point. So like the real change, if they made the Asterhus more like the smaller citadels were easier to blow up and they were more like a POS, and then you put more effort into a Fortizar, so it takes longer to kill a Fortizar or a Keepstar, right? I'm totally cool with that. I think that the Citadel changes. I think that if you wanted to make the Citadel system a little bit better, making the Asterhuses and the smaller Citadels like a two reinforced timer thing, just like a large POS, that would go a huge way to fix the Aster Who spam problem.
Yeah, I mean the problem is that on a 7 day timer you lose all your momentum.
Yeah.
By the time the final timer come up, you've forgotten that you've been reinforced, that you've been doing other things. You've been going out and having
You,
fun,
you
and
need
then
to you
you're
need
like,
to
oh
put it
yeah,
on a fucking calendar. Like, oh yeah, that thing that we
yes,
reinforced into structure literally last week, like a week in Eve time, and it's like 6 days. 6 days in Eve time is, a month. A week in any game is forever, basically, as far as the time sense of gamers. One of the things Dirk is asking here is, do we want them to fix or improve FozzieSov if it might vanish when all the new structures are in place, or would that just be a waste of resources? Well, that's exactly what CCP said at FanFest when Johnson Stroker brought up his idea to basically balance, FozzieSov more by making it require a war deck before you hack. They said at the nullsec roundtable, essentially, you know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Well, we're not really going to be focusing development on FozzieSov because they know it's fucked, right? And I think that we would all just have an easier time if they would just openly admit, look, guys, we screwed the pooch. Not enough development thought or feedback went into this. This was really dumb. We're sorry, and we're going to use Citadel mechanics because I think CCP is heading in that direction. They're very clearly the moment that outposts are destructible and they become citadels. Functionally, FozzieSov is almost gone. Right, like you can almost ignore FozzieSov. You can't completely, but you can almost ignore it if that happens in winter.
I've talked to a lot of ex CSMs, and this is like not I'm not talking about good CSMs. I'm talking about all around the game. And one thing that they all told me, or not they all, but many have told me, is that the way to get CCP to do something is not to suggest a solution. It's to just suggest that there's a problem and maybe a general direction, but nothing else. And it seems like that was the huge problem with FozzieSov is that you and so many other nullsec leaders like wrote out that paper where you asked for
Occupancy
uh,
solve.
occupancy solve, but the solutions weren't there. And apparently that was a really heady thing because CCP doesn't want to be told what to do by the players.
A blue, blue,
But
blue, a blue, blue, blue. Listening to your customers. That's the thing. So many other companies actually engage with their customers in a healthy way, i.e., not genuflecting at the altar of Reddit. And they like customer feedback because they want to know what their customers want. But there are definitely some thin-skinned people in CCP throughout the history of the company. It's not all of them, but some of them do get horrified by the very idea that people disagree about things that they do, and then they get super butt blasted and petty.
in chat, Azure says something about like that CCP can't, adjust for it because of just Fozzie because they would have to admit that Fozzie is dumb. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think Fozzie's a really smart guy, but first off, it wasn't totally his idea. But you can have a lot of ideas. Like if you ever design a doctrine in Eve, you can get, and this applies to other things. But if you design a doctrine in Eve and you do it on EFT and you look at the stats, it looks great. Like this is a great looking doctrine. This is going to win all the fights. And then you bring it out in the field, it just kind of sucks. You're like, okay, well, it looked good on paper, but it didn't look, it didn't work out in the field. And that's kind of how I feel about Fozzie stuff. I actually think it was a good idea to try to get people to have like engaging fights, but it turned out to be the exact opposite of that. The
Well,
problem wasn't so much that they came out with that; it was that they didn't change, they didn't iterate on it at all.
I mean, I think that you are very polite, and it's good that somebody is going to be good cop when it comes to the FozzieSov stuff. I mean, it seems to me, my impression of FozzieSov was that the dude tried to take his alliance tournament concepts and make Sov into an alliance tournament because he didn't understand macro scale social dynamics, and it was only later when an entire team was really brought in to sort of clean up the mess that the worst aspects of FozzieSov were mitigated somewhat. It's just. It's just bad. I
This,
think,
this, is, this is a CCP problem. They don't have enough developers, so they come out with a bad idea and then they just leave it. It just flies there like a dead fish.
yeah,
Uh, and if they would just have enough developers that they could follow up on ideas and iterate on them, then these sort of ideas that maybe don't start off great off the bat. I mean, not no one. It's rare to have the perfect idea from the start. Everyone has to make adjustments. I don't think Einstein's first draft of theory of relativity was the one he published, right?
right.
Like so you're never gonna have your first thing be a total hit. But that's what they do. They just release it and then they move on to the next thing because they don't have enough devs. They want to get the next feature out with the overworked devs that they have, and it's kind of it shows. It just shows.
It's a mess. I mean, I think that CCP's development history, when you really started seeing the exodus of people from what I call like old school CCP leaving to go to Riot, right? I mean, that's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of really, really good people who have CCP on the resume that are now at much more powerful and successful companies.
That are
Uh,
now getting triple the salary.
yeah, and that's not even necessarily a thing that's saying that like CCP as a company right now sucks. It means that they have trouble retaining talent because their location in Iceland, right? Like if CCP was based in Seattle, right? Can you just imagine? And also if they just paid competitive salaries for like the rest of the
Right.
games industry, like they were in Seattle, and that what worked back in the day to attract top tier talent was Eve was such a great game that people would be willing to take the salary hit and move to Iceland of all places just to try to make Eve better. And until you can really retain top talent and also fund the game, like the game is making CCP lots of money, right? Like the Eve CCP is
Oh,
quite
it's a cash
successful there,
cow.
but like all of that money in development seems to be aiming towards trying to develop like this Spark VR thing or like random other projects. It's almost as if Eve has just always been a golden goose that is
It's
being
almost like they don't
starved.
believe in Eve. They don't
Yeah,
believe in Eve like we do.
yeah, it's like they're trying to get, and the devs who are working on Eve do believe on Eve. I think that it's at the executive level that they've been allocating resources to just ridiculous pie in the sky projects that inevitably have failed, like Dust 514, which had no reason to fail if they'd put it on PC, and now it's like, oh well, it's Project Nova or whatever, and then oops, we talked about it, we announced that it didn't go anywhere. Valkyrie was a flop, even though it shouldn't have been a flop. It was totally sort of mismanaged in its pricing and rollout. It's just a shame. I mean, I've always wished that at a certain level somebody would buy out CCP and move it to Seattle.
Not to
And
get too inside baseball, but I'd actually I don't think CCP could compete in Seattle. Too much money there. But put it in Nashville or Fayetteville, where the cost of living is low and people would like to live. Would like to live elsewhere and have an option. That's where you get the underutilized talent, so that you could have really good talent there, and they could be living on the CCP wages, in a nice house. CCP wages aren't going to pay for a nice house in Seattle.
Draculus is saying, I've heard that money is actually good compared to the rest of the industry. The problem is the cost of living in Iceland. If that's changed, that's great. Back in the day, CCP salaries were not not competitive in the first place, and also the cost of living in Iceland is in fact catastrophically high. It's just a really sort of an ugly setup. But I'm not really sure whether at this point the issue with Fozzie is a lack of developers, or whether it's just that the developers that are there, like you're seeing it's a very thin-skinned sort of reaction to the player base, right? Like all of this drama, just like in the original Summer of Rage in 2011, it was like, if you're
Yeah.
in Iceland, you don't encounter criticism much, right? It's an incredibly it's one of the most passive aggressive places on Earth. So you're literally on an island, and I like Iceland a decent amount. I've been there literally 17 times. I counted my visa stamps when I got back from this most recent FanFest trip. I've been to Iceland 17 fucking times, which is ridiculous. So I know it pretty well, and I like it well enough. But because it is a tiny island in the middle of the North Atlantic where everybody has been sharing the same genetics for however many years, and it's a Scandinavian culture, like Wisconsin and Minnesota. Scandinavian cultures have the Yante laws, which is basically codified passive aggressiveness, and people have to get along with each other because they're trapped on an island. So they're not really going around in Iceland and hanging out at the bar and going like, hey dude, your soft system sucks and nobody likes it. So I've always noticed that CCP seems more thin-skinned and reactive, just because when they're in the echo chamber of that island, they don't encounter criticism often.
Yeah, it is weird that there are relatively small American towns that are bigger than the entire country of Iceland.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's like 310,000 people, something like that.
Yeah, it is. All of Iceland is basically, I mean, Reykjavik, the city center of Reykjavik, is like 100,000 people in the metropolitan area of Reykjavik. So it is so small. And that's a very small talent pool. Like you have people who are born and raised in Iceland that are willing to go work for CCP, or you have people who are willing to make the sacrifice to try to immigrate to a place like that and work on Eve. And it's just
I
tough.
just looked it up. Iceland is roughly the same population as Stockton, California, St. Paul, Minnesota, or Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah, as an Icelander, I can confirm that this is true. Those who do say something are usually not liked much after that. Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, in Iceland, there's so few places to go or do. So like, you gotta, or things to do. Like, sure, you can go running, climbing, jumping, running, jumping, climbing trees. Except the trees are only 8 feet high, where they do have trees, and they run into each other over and over and over again at the same few bars. So there's this. Icelanders have a word. It turns out this is one of my favorites. Icelanders have an entire word and a ritual to describe, and now since we do have an Icelander in chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong, to describe what everywhere else we would call just having an open and honest conversation and sorting things out, right? And they call it, I think it's like truno or something. It's like, oh, like truno or something or other. And our Icelandic friends can tell us what it actually is. But basically, it was explained to me once, like I saw two Icelanders go off and they're going to go whatever. Another Icelander turns to me and he's like, they're having a truno. And I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, it's where you get together and you have a conversation and you air your grievances and you bury the hatchet. So, like, that's just normal maintenance of relationships and not being a shitty friend in the United States. We don't have a ritual for, hey, we need to talk, stop being such a dick, right? But that's
We don't put a rope in a square and put down hatchets in the middle of it.
exactly. Like that there isn't a ritual for having an open and honest conversation, right? Because that's just conversation in people in places where it's not like this ritualized passive aggression. So they actually have to have a special word for it to describe uh, you know possibly saying something that will mean that somebody gets critiqued. Sounds like
Hasn't
Matani is the one that gets butthurt. Oh, that's good. We've
oh
got
boy.
Bender03. It's been a pretty chill show in terms of chat. I haven't actually seen somebody, throwing shade of any kind. Hopefully we can get somebody. Yeah, Truno. He's spelled it out here. That's what it is. Yeah, I mean, like, you get drunk with your friends, you do stupid shit, and then you talk it out over beer, right? You don't have to have a ritual name for it. So that's the environment that we're dealing with. And I think that context is important for, like, the EVE player base that's, like, wondering why it is that CCP can be so weird when they get criticized. Because when you're on that fucking island, everybody's doing whatever they can to be nice because there's a practical reason why it's so passive aggressive. You see passive aggression in small towns across the world, like any tiny town, but particularly a tiny town that's on an island. Everybody has to get along because you can't escape each other. I can't even imagine how awful it must be to have ex-girlfriends in Iceland. Like, can you imagine?
So you're saying Iceland's affected with bless her little heartism?
Yeah, basically. Have I gained weight, Matani? Don't turn into Boat 2.0, please. No, I haven't gained weight. So now if somebody's saying that I'm fat, I'm sad.
You're
I
a
did.
sensitive soul.
Bless his heart. That's bless his heart. Yeah, it really is that way. It's just a mess. So that's one of the things that we saw during the Summer of Rage is that it's really like you don't see, and I say the original Summer of Rage, things escalated to a crisis because they don't want to admit fault, right? It's so rude to criticize someone or their work or anything like that, and it's so rare that it happens in Iceland that it's like, have you seen like really big guys on the internet getting on the internet and they like lose their shit because they're actually like really big intimidated guys in the real world and they're just not used to anybody trolling them or talking shit, and so they just
Yeah,
can't
right.
handle it at all. Like, I've seen some dudes who like get on the internet and they're like former Marines and they're like 6'7" and they're like actually like combat vets or whatever, and then they go on the internet and somebody's like, ha ha ha, you suck, and it's like, ah, and then like the dude who's like a really big guy flips his shit because he's never had to deal with people just slings and arrows on the internet, and so like totally reactive, totally unexpected, because nobody ever comes up to dudes like that in the real world and goes, ha ha ha, you suck, whatever, because people don't want to get their necks broken. So that's kind of like the way that CCP reacts, I've always found.
Hasn't CCP been shopping Eve like the last year, or the company, I guess? I'm not sure the game or the company have been shopping it the last year or so. Like, I've heard that they've tried to make their profit numbers look a lot better because they're trying to sell it.
I think that it's a situation where they want to sell some of their shares, basically. Like I think that the original shareholders hope that somebody wants to buy the shares, not to sell the entire company. But I think there's a lot of people who were holding CCP shares back in the day that probably want to get rid of them. They did float a trial balloon. They had like a press release saying that somebody was thinking about buying their company, which was I don't believe that's true. I think that's a classic business technique where you say, "Oh, well, we're entertaining offers." Which implies, hey guys, we're entertaining offers. Guys, we're for sale. Somebody wants to buy us something.
Yeah,
Anybody want some shares? Right. I think that's all that was.
better get in here quick.
Exactly. Um, let's see what we got here. I'm, Caleb is saying that CCP are amateurs and they're too friendly with the players. It's almost like saying that you've been making games for since 2003 was when Eve came out, so that's 15, almost 15 years since Eve was published. It's kind of hard to claim to be an amateur at that point, right? Like you're actually a professional game development company that has been publishing a product for more than a decade consistently, and millions of dollars are flowing around. So, once you have more than $1 million in a bank account, I kind of think you lose the ability to claim that you're an amateur. New subscriber, also 9 months. Thanks, dude. Awesome. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just
You know, I do say careful what you wish for when it talks about someone else buying the game. It's a game made by Icelandic people, funded by a weird board game that they released. It's a product of its time, and you would never see something similar to it made today.
yeah.
It's
I
so
think that's the
different, and
case.
the fact, like, can you just imagine someone buying it and just saying, "Oh, it's scamming"? That's against the rules. Like, that's indecent. The stuff that makes this game unique is what appeals to us. So I would worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would really only be comfortable with me being the one to buy it. Like if I
Of
ended up
course, you
ended up in charge of like a private equity firm and buying it out from under them or buying their debt or something. Like, there's been a lot of alliances that actually have had like doomsday plans from the Summer of Rage or other. The nightmare of large alliances is another incident of CCP idiocy, where like one day your community is displaced because Hilmar woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever. So I do know that lots of alliances uh, have had discussions with the attorneys who are in alliances, and the idea of what's the dust off the doomsday plan, like Doctor Strangelove style. You're like going to the safe and pulling it out, in case of Hilmar apocalypse, like you know
we must save you from yourselves.
Exactly. Like, it wouldn't surprise me. It actually wouldn't surprise me at all if ultimately, if there was an existential threat to Eve, because, Eve is full of finance people and lawyers, and, wouldn't surprise me if somebody did get like a private equity round together to buy the company if there was an extinction level event. Um, but I wouldn't do that because I would then have to stop playing Eve, and I don't want to stop playing Eve. Well, my way, anyway.
I'm sorry. I'm just imagining you running Eve and all the things that would entail.
Me running Eve would
Uh,
be bad for Eve. So
yeah. I mean, could you? Do you think? I mean, honestly, do you think? I know this is a fantastical scenario we've concocted for ourselves here, but
and
could you separate yourself from the Goon Swarm idea and run it impartially, or is that not possible for you?
well, for me, the way that I run organizations actually. Somebody that I know recently likened Goonswarm itself and the Imperium to an extended, like it operates more like a holding company in the real world, where essentially my job as the leader is not just like giving speeches, but essentially like green lighting uh, companies like a SIG or a squad is saying like, yes, this is a project we're going to invest in, this is a project we're not going to invest in, and then being pretty hands off. I would be more comfortable with somebody owning Eve and then having some like I miss the John Lander days, the CCP Unifex days. There've been a lot of people who are very talented that have worked on Eve in the past, and I think that you could own the company but not control the company. Like you could be on the board of directors or something like that, but then the people who are actually running the game, there would have to be a huge separation between me and anything else. Because the
Bit of
thing
a
is,
firewall.
well, because the other thing about it is think about it like this way: even if I somehow magically could avoid a conflict of interest, right, in my own head or using the directorate in a way to make sure that there were firewalls, in practice, the rest of the game wouldn't believe it. right? Like
Right.
reputationally speaking, if I was playing Eve and I somehow managed to get control of the company, uh, people would believe that I was cheating to help Goonswarm, regardless. So it almost
Well,
doesn't matter
remember,
whether I could do it or
part of
not.
the game already thinks you're running the game anyway,
That's
so
true. Yeah.
don't want to disappoint them.
Yeah, that is also a thing, is that I guess the people who are worried about like me running things already do believe that I'm secretly in charge of all of this, which I'm not. So the Trombani, says Sadis. That's excellent. So we are running out of time here. We're running over a little bit. I don't believe that we have the boat show or anything up next because Boat is obviously spending time with his family. We got started about 10 minutes late, so I think we'll go for another couple minutes and then wrap things up. Don't you have Alliance tournament practice also?
I do, and then I got Reaver stuff. Man, busy Eve night for me.
Yeah, all of the Eve. Mittens takes over CCP, and our true CEO Darius Johnson can take over. Uh,
Oh man,
that would be amazing. We'd be out of Delve inside of like a week or two. Um, so yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Asher. And again, we deeply miss Boat because doing all this whole stream stuff turns out to be really hard. Who knew? So that's pretty cool. And now, Asher, any final notes you want to make before we scamper off for the evening?
no, just want to say thanks for having me on, and shout out to my AT team guys and my Reavers guys.
Yeah, congrats, guys. And I don't know what this Reavers thing is. It's some Firefly stuff, and I still don't believe that the Reavers exist. Uh,
I'm deep into Firefly fandom and roleplay.
Yeah, exactly,
I'll
exactly.
send you some of my fan fiction. I put you in one of them. Yeah.
That is scary because some people have actually written me into fanfic because of EVE Online unironically instead of ironic fanfic, which is funny. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for turning up for the show. I really appreciate all the subscriptions and donations we got. I think I got most of the shout outs, but I did miss some. I saw Viper 187 subbed, and I'm going through scroll back, and it's been an interesting show. I really like talking about the meta stuff where we're not so much going over the news, but we're going like where could the game go and how could we uh, what could we suggest to make things better? So we'll be back.
Keepstar died. Killed
Yeah,
the Keepstar.
and we killed a Keepstar. Yay! That happened. That is, in fact, a thing that happened. That's some news. So yeah, guys, we'll be back next week with Boat, and thank God because it turns out that Boat does a whole lot of work to make this meta show run effectively, and we miss him. So thank you, Asher, for being our guest, and we will see you guys next week.
Later.